GlobalProtect Gateway. Okay everyone, this video, now that we have our GlobalProtect portal configured, it's time to enable the gateway and allow those remote users to connect to our on-prem environment or cloud environment. So we have our firewall, it's sitting on the outside. We want to enable the gateway in order for us to provide remote access to our remote users, vendors, etc. We want to allow people to securely connect into our environment by establishing a VPN connection to our Palo Alto's outside interface. And this is where we configure the GlobalProtect Gateway. Okay, so if you take a look here at my diagram, I have a GlobalProtect client, and this is the application that we are going to download from the portal. So remember on the last video, we configured the GlobalProtect portal, and clients are going to point to either the public IP or the fully qualifying domain name in order for them to download the client. Once they have it installed, they're going to point into the public IP that is allocated into the GlobalProtect Gateway configuration. So once we create that GlobalProtect Gateway, we're going to allocate that public IP, and our remote users, either they're going to point to the public IP, or if we sign a certificate, which we definitely need to do a certificate, it's definitely a more secure approach, we'll sign the certificate using a fully qualified domain name, and then if you have a public DNS provider, you can change your public A record to point to the public IP. In this demonstration, we're just going to do it with public IP, but the outcome will be the same if you go into performing a fully qualified domain name. Okay, so we have GlobalProtect client is going to connect to our Palo Alto through the GlobalProtect Gateway. Once we are connected, we're going to get a route advertised on our GlobalProtect client that will tell the endpoint or the user machine, hey, I have access to the 192.168.0.0/24 via this tunnel interface that is established using the GlobalProtect client. We're going to take a look at how do you advertise specific routes and how GlobalProtect client sees those on the end user. So we open the GlobalProtect client, and there's a section in the client that you can see what routes are being advertised via this connection. Okay. Let's continue. So there's a couple of items that we need to configure in the GlobalProtect Gateway. One of them, we should have already configured the GlobalProtect portal, because we're now going to enable that agent into the portal that is going to allow us to authenticate and connect to the gateway. We need to also create a tunnel interface, and the tunnel interface is to point a specific source of that traffic either coming inbound or going outbound firewall. So we're going to allocate all of our remote GlobalProtect traffic using that tunnel interface, and then we can apply policies as well. So we can use that tunnel interface as this is the interface that my traffic from my remote users are going to the on-prem environment, and we can apply policies and restrict traffic if we need to. We also need to create a GlobalProtect zone, and this is another zone on the firewall. Is just like the outside and inside, we're going to allocate the tunnel interface that we just created, add them into GlobalProtect zone. Once we have that, it's a matter of creating that security policy and allowing the access if we need to, based on the requirements for that remote user. And finally, we need to allocate the users that are going to be allowed to connect to, and this is done on the actual gateway. So on the GlobalProtect Gateway settings, we are going to map either the local users or remote users that we have that are going to be allowed to connect via VPN. Once we have all that, we'll basically configure that GlobalProtect Gateway, attach all the SSL settings or the SSL certificate that we have for our GlobalProtect portal into the gateway, and we'll configure the IP pool, and this is the IP pool. It's the private address range that we're going to assign those remote users once they establish a connection. And then finally the agent settings and such. So let's go ahead, let's jump real quick onto configuring that gateway. Now that we have the GlobalProtect portal configured, it's a matter of configuring the gateway and adding those attributes that is going to allow our remote users to establish a connection. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so I have my firewall here, and this firewall is currently running in Microsoft Azure. I have a public IP allocated to it, and I can definitely reach out from the outside. I can do all changes from the outside. And I am also attaching a particular public IP dedicated for the GlobalProtect connectivity. Okay, so the first thing we got to do is configure a zone. So let's go ahead and configure real quick the GlobalProtect zone. We'll make it traditional layer 3. And we're going to leave interfaces as it is for now. And then let's go ahead and configure a tunnel interface. And as a matter of fact, I already have tunnel 1. We can use tunnel 1. If you can see here, it's not attached to anything. It's just, sitting there. Let me go ahead and to GlobalProtect. And let's attach tunnel interface 1. And now we know that tunnel interface 1 belongs to the GlobalProtect zone. So once we configure the gateway, we attach this particular tunnel and we should be good to go. Okay, so we now have the zone and we have the interface attached to the zone. So you can see here, something very important that we need to do, and we need to enable user identification because we want to know the users that are connecting via this particular zone so we can inspect their end devices. So if we want to put policies that will restrict or allow users based on what end device are they trying to use to connect to, for example, if we want to have users meet certain security requirements in order for them to connect, then this is done with HIP profiles. In HIP profiles, you can say, well, if the machine is not up to date with Windows updates, I am not going to allow it in. The machine doesn't have an up-to-date antivirus, I am not going to allow it, and such. So you definitely need to enable this. And also, this is a requirement because the Palo Alto is going to take a look at the user attribute once they try to log in or traverse between zones. So make sure that you always enable this, okay? We'll press OK. Okay, so we have this ready. Let's go ahead and configure the gateway. We're going to click Add, and this name we're going to call it GlobalProtect Gateway. Interface, it's sitting on the outside, so we're going to select our interface E11. This is my outside interface, and I am going to select the public IP. And you see this is a private IP, and the reason why I have it in Azure, and Azure allocates a private IP, but then it maps a public IP to it. So if you're familiar with Azure, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not familiar with Azure, this is the way. So they're going to give you a private subnet that is called the untrusted subnet. And then you can attach a public IP. It's basically doing some sort of natting in the cloud. So the cloud will basically NAT to this particular private IP. But this is why it shows as private. If you're not running it on the cloud and it's on-prem, you're going to see a public IP here. This will be interface public IP. Or you can allocate a different public IP if you have a public block available. Okay, so let's go into authentication. Authentication, we're going to use the SSL service profile that we used to configure that GlobalProtect portal. So once we made that GlobalProtect portal, at some point we had to do an SSL profile so it can have a certificate binded to the service. In this case, I'm just going to use the same one that I was using for the portal. Next, we need to enable client authentication, and this is how the Palo Alto is going to take a look at the particular user attributes as well as the user login to confirm that they're authorized to log in. We're going to click Add, and we're going to say Client Auth. That's a test. Operating system, I am going to allow anything. And then I am going to attach my local authentication profile, and this is the local auth profile that I made on the device, and I'm going to show it real quick. Let me go ahead and show it to you. Let me just press OK, and we'll come back to this slide. Let me go back here. So if we go here in auth profile, and this is where I attach type of authentication that I'm going to grant to GlobalProtect Gateway or any other service in the Palo Alto. In this case, I'm using it for GlobalProtect Gateway. So I'm going to look in my local Palo Alto firewall database for local users. So any local user inside the local database will be matched against this authentication profile. I'm going to press OK. And right now, because this is just a demo, I'm going to allow all. So any user that I have configured here is going to be allowed. And currently, I only have one VPN user. But if I have multiple VPN users, because I am attaching all as my allow list, then I'm going to allow everyone to connect. You definitely want to make sure that you have specific groups, not allow all, because maybe not everyone is entitled to do VPN. So you want to make sure that you have that. And obviously, I'm using local authentication because I am looking for my local user database. Okay, so let's go back. Let me go back here. And so we were here. And now you know why we need that local auth profile. And I am going to let this by default, so username, password, and then enter login details. This will be shown on the actual application itself, on the GlobalProtect client. If you want to change that to something different so that your users are more familiar with your client, then you can do so. You can modify this as you wish. So we have that. Let me go onto the agent. Okay, this is very important. In agent, we're going to enable tunnel mode, right? Because we want to have the GlobalProtect zone available for us so we can create multiple policies, because we can have multiple VPN connections, but I can attach them to separate policies. I don't want to have just one policy. I want to make sure that I can segment connectivity on the GlobalProtect side. So if, for example, I have a group of users are part of HR and I want them to go to the HR resources, I can be granular with that. So just enable tunnel mode, and then we're going to select our tunnel interface, which we selected 1 to be that tunnel interface. Okay? If you want to enable IPsec, you can make this connectivity IPsec. For now, I'm just going to make it simpler for this demonstration, but you can definitely do IPsec. It's way more secure. And then you got to attach a crypto profile for this IPsec type of connectivity. We're just going to click here. Timeouts. So you can say how much time do you want to leave the user logged in, and how long do you want to disconnect if you don't see any traffic from that user, as well as an activity. So I want to make sure that the user is disconnected, auto-disconnected after 3 hours if they're not doing anything on the connection. Client IP pool. I can set an client IP pool here, so I can tell I want to offer this range of private IPs to my GlobalProtect clients. But I'm going to do a client profile that is going to be here. I can also configure this same setting there. In this case, it's going to tell if you put IPs here, I'm going to add those IPs as the tunnel traffic. So the Palo Alto will know that those IPs are part of that particular route or particular tunnel. So the tunnel will be binded to that particular IP. But I'm going to show you, I think, a better way to configure this, which is going via the client settings and then configuring all those attributes here. So now in client settings, I'm going to click add, right? And then we're going to call it client. And then we're going to select user groups or users. In this case, I'm going to leave it in any. IP pools. Okay, this is what I was talking. Let's configure that IP pool range. Let's say 10.0.0.10 to 10.0.0.100. So I'm going to allow over 90 connections into the GlobalProtect Gateway because I'm going to offer over 90 addresses. So if I run out of IPs, then I need to add another or extend their pool or add another range if I want to. And split tunnel. Okay, another thing that is very important. This is where you gotta specify what subnets they're going to be able to reach via that tunnel. So this is how you advertise your internal networks to the GlobalProtect client. So this is how you tell the GlobalProtect client and the end machine or the end user, hey, you're able to reach this networks via this connection. So in this case, because we only have one network based on our slide, which is 192.168.0.0/24, so I'm going to tell all my remote users that they're going to be able to reach this network via their connection. Okay, we'll press OK. So we got that. And network services, this is where you definitely need to configure that DNS entry. So the end machine can reach a DNS server if they need to resolve an internal name for an application or of a service that you're offering on premise. In this case, I'm not going to. It's just a demonstration. And HIP, I can configure those policies that I mentioned before, that you can restrict traffic if their users are not meeting the requirements, like they don't have up-to-date antivirus, they don't have enable updates, etc. Satellite. In satellite, if I want to configure a specific tunnel config for this particular section, I can do so. I am not going into detail on satellites. I am going to use the normal agent config for this particular demonstration, but that's something you want to take a look at. It's also another option that you can go ahead and configure the gateway in satellite mode. I am going to do agent mode, which basically is the de facto standard way of configuring it, but you're good to set it up in satellite mode as well. I am going to do agent without IPsec. For this demonstration, we're not going to enable IPsec. So we have pretty much everything that we need. Let me go and click OK. Let me go to portals. And now I got to enable the portal to authenticate my GlobalProtect Gateway users. So let's go ahead real quick here into the GlobalProtect portal. We're not in the gateway anymore. We're on the portal. Portal config. Okay, we got to make sure that we're using the same authentication profile. Let me go now onto agent, and this is very important, okay? If you configure the agent, but you don't tell the GlobalProtect portal, hey, I am going to allow connectivity from a specific public IP or FQDN, the GlobalProtect client will not work. It's going to say it's invalid. The gateway is invalid because I am not allowing it on the portal. So the portal and the gateway are very much related. So you got to make sure that everything is consistent between the gateway and the portal. So let me go ahead and configure the agent. And this is the portal agent. We already configured the GlobalProtect Gateway agent, which we allocated that IP pool, we allocated those routes, and we added the user that is going to be allowed to connect to. In this case, we need to tell the Palo Alto, hey, if you see a user connecting to this portal to the gateway, then you want to allow it. I'm going to say, and then we're going to say, we have options to enable client certificates if you want. We're not going to do client certificates. We want to override the authentication profile. We can do so. We're not. We want to enable two-factor. If you want to do two-factor or 2FA off, we can do so from here. In this case, we're not. And then we're just going to leave it as an any. Internal gateways, we don't have internal gateway. We have external gateways. And this is where we attach that public IP into our config. And we're going to say global protect IP. And then in this case, I'm going to do an IP. I don't have a fully qualified domain name. Let me find the IP. Okay, so I have my IP here. Let me go ahead and type it. It's going to be 4086. And by the way, if you see, this is not the public IP for the GlobalProtect Gateway. This is actually my management interface that I have a public-facing IP so I can manage it from the outside. Again, I'm mentioning that this is an Azure cloud firewall. Okay, so I have my public IP here, and this is the IP that is attached to the outside interface in this particular model. And I can show you in Azure in a bit so you can take a look and see how that is. Let me go ahead and pull Azure so you're more familiar. You're not getting confused of why I have this public IP and not this one, okay? Give me 1 second. I'm going to select my firewall. This is my Palo Alto, the one that we're connecting to. And you can see here, this is my management IP. If you remember on my firewall, let me go back into the firewall. It's the 4078-8480. So this is my public management IP, and this is my outside interface public IP. Let me show you that again. Okay, so we go back into Azure. Let me go into networking, and then let me click on Ethernet 1, and there you go. That is my public IP, and it's facing my untrust subnet in Azure, which is the 10.0.1.4. If you remember on the portal or on the gateway when I configured the public IP and it was actually a private, this is actually translated to this. So this public IP in Azure translates to this on the inside. That's how I'm able to reach the firewall from the outside. So this is my public IP right here. And if you're wondering how to allocate public IPs in Azure, I can give you a freebie, and this is how you do it. So you go onto your interface on your virtual machine in the cloud, and then go to IP configs, and this is how you attach a public IP. So I have my interface on the outside. So this is my outside interface in the Palo Alto. If you click this, you can actually attach a public IP. So this is how you attach a public IP to a private interface on your cloud firewall. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so once here, now we have a public IP. Now you understand what's the difference between this and this. I'm going to click add. And this is source region. I can be specific from which part of the world we're going to allow access into this particular GlobalProtect Gateway. For this demonstration, I'm going to do any. But you can be granular. You can select specific address ranges. But in this case, I am going to allow all of it. And we'll press OK. And then let's see what else we have. Oh, this is very important. Okay, so in the portal, I can modify the behavior on the client itself. This is one great example. So by default, the Palo Alto will set the client. So the Palo Alto dictates the client how it's going to behave as far as connectivity. If you leave this in default, which is user logon always on, the GlobalProtect client, every time that you boot up your machine, it's going to auto-connect. It's going to try to auto-connect once you log in into your desktop, and you're not going to be able to even disconnect. It's not going to show you a disconnect button. So you got to make sure that you change this to on demand, which will allow you to do a manual user initiated connection. This will allow you to have the disconnect and connect, so you can connect as you wish. It's an on-demand setting. And here, this is not only the setting. We have so much that we can change and tweak. So for example, allow the user to disable the GlobalProtect client or the application. I am allowing it. You want to be very strict, I can disallow it. So I can basically not allow the end user to disable the app. So they're going to be connected 24/7. And that's, you control it. This is very powerful. You can dictate how your end user's client will work. Okay, so let me show you. There's a lot of settings here. You can do Windows auth. You can do single sign-on. You can have change the thresholds. Every time that you're going to try to restore connection, it's 5 minutes, etc. So also you can have a welcome page, and this is very important. Once the user connects, you can create a welcome page that shows, hey, you just connected into XYZ's VPN tunnel, this connectivity is restricted, only authorized users can log in, blah, blah, blah. So you can have a disclaimer page that is shown to the user once they establish a connection. So this is done through the welcome page, and you can import your own. So you can generate your own welcome page and upload it as well. In this case, I'm going to just leave it as on demand. By the way, you know what? I'm going to, for this demonstration, let's leave it on default, and I'm going to show you what's the difference. You're going to see that I'm not going to be able to disconnect. I'm just going to leave it there, and we'll change it, and you'll see the difference. Okay? All right, so we got this. We'll click OK. And finally, we got to authorize the CA that issued our certificate as a trusted CA. If we don't do that, it's not going to allow us to connect to the gateway because it's not going to understand the certificate that we're trying to connect to. It's going to show us an invalid certificate. So we're just going to add our local Palo Alto as a trusted root CA. Okay, we got that. Let me see what else we got to do. No, I think that's about it. And we're not doing satellite config. We're just doing this agent, and that's it. We'll press OK. And yeah, looks good. So we're going to commit. And I already showed you that we have a local user. I'm going to use that local user to connect to the gateway. So let's give it a shot. Let's wait until this finishes and we'll test the connection. Okay, has finished. Let me go ahead real quick and open my virtual machine. I have a virtual machine that we can do that testing from. Okay, here I am. And I already installed my GlobalProtect client. So I have right here. And it's asking us to type the public IP. Let's go ahead and type the public IP, which was 4078.62.86. Okay, we'll press enter, and it should tell us yeah, correct. So we have now our VPN user 1. This is our VPN account that we have on the Palo Alto. It's asking us for those credentials, and let's type the password, and let's try to connect. Let's see if we're lucky. Boom, and we are connected. Woohoo! All right, let's take a look at what we have. Let me go into settings. Okay, in your GlobalProtect client, you're going to be shown the general tab, which basically shows the status and if you're connected or not. Connection. I am showing myself to be an external. I'm tunnel connected, and I am authenticated with my Palo Alto, which is sitting on the Azure environment. And see here, I got an assigned local IP. If you remember on the GlobalProtect Gateway agent settings, I have an IP pool range that I allocated from 10.00.10 all the way to 10.00.100. So here you go. I got the address 10, which is the first address in my range. If we go into host profiles, this is all the information that the GlobalProtect client is sending to the Palo Alto. So the Palo Alto can now see everything about my machine. So I can create policies based on the attributes that the client is sending. So I can restrict traffic if I am not meeting the requirements for HIP. Troubleshooting, and this is a great way also to see that we indeed have that route injected. Let me take a look here. And sure enough, remember when we allocated that 192.168.00/24, and this is it. Now the Palo Alto told this end machine, hey, I got a subnet that is advertised via that GlobalProtect client. This is how you can reach the network via. So if you want to reach 192.168.00, go over the tunnel. That's about it. Let me now change, because you saw on my config, there's no way to disconnect because I left this in on demand. If you see here, I can disable it. That is not actually disconnecting, it's disabling the client as a whole. You don't want to do that. You want to disconnect and connect whenever you like, right? So let's go ahead and change that, and you should see now the option to be able to connect on demand or disconnect whenever you like. So let me go ahead and go back onto the PA. Okay, let's go back onto network. Let me go to the portal. We're going to go to the agent. I'm going to go here. And then we're going to go into the app, and then we're going to change this to be on demand. Once we do that, we got to disable the client and re-enable it, and then we should get the new settings from the firewall. We'll press OK, OK, commit. Let's wait until this commits, and we'll test it again. It's almost done. Let me go back onto my machine. Okay, let me go ahead and, you see, I cannot even delete or edit. It's completely locked. So let me go ahead and disable it. And I should drop because I disabled the application. Let me wait for that. And there you go. We're disabled. Okay. So now I am going to enable the client back. And now it's asking me again for those credentials. Let me go ahead and type the password. Let's see now if we have the option to disconnect. And there you go. Now what's the difference? Now I can definitely disconnect. You see, you can modify the behavior on your client using the GlobalProtect portal agent settings. So make sure that you set, I don't know if your environment needs to be completely always on, you can do it, but I want to give out the users, the flexibility to disconnect and connect with. So I'm just gonna disconnect, and that's it. That's about it. You're connected, disconnected. That's GlobalProtect Gateway, and we're done. Okay, everyone, we will begin section 8 in our next video into management and maintenance operations. Thank you for watching.